On this episode of Delivering Marketing Joy, we talk with author and entrepreneur Tim Fargo about how to grow fast and how to grow smart. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We have a repeat guest today, and I'm super excited to welcome back Tim Fargo, who's the founder of multiple organizations, but currently Tweet Jukebox, a product that I'm actually using right now. And so I want to welcome Tim back to the show. Thanks, man.
Hey, Kirby, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. We had a great one last time, and it's worth mentioning, the most watched episode to date, so that's pretty cool.
Woo!
Yeah,
like
that's
records,
right. That's
man.
right. We want to throw that out there. So I want to jump right in. One of the things that strikes me about you, Tim, is that you were able to grow a company to the Inc. 500 twice. That's a lot of people haven't done that once, let alone twice. And so, a lot of people who are entrepreneurs watching the show, what tips do you have for entrepreneurs for growing both fast and smart?
The first thing, and I believe I actually mentioned this in the other episode, but it's such an important thing. You've got to absolutely control your expenses. People fall in love with having a nice desk, whatever. The first company I had, my accountant, when he first came to meet me, couldn't believe nobody had a desk. Everyone had a folding table. That's all we had.
Right.
And when people were like, why don't you have a desk? Like, the day someone can tell me, oh, I'll make more money because I have a desk, I'll get one.
Right.
And that might sound like really over the top, but trust me, when you run out of money, you'll be looking at that desk that you spent $1,000 on thinking, I really wish I had that money back.
Yeah, for sure.
So, so controlling overhead, and to me, that's not necessarily part of the acceleration piece, but what that is a part of is staying in the game to be in a position to accelerate at some point.
Right.
Because very often you're not going to, there are some really highly scalable businesses, but sometimes that point of scalability doesn't arrive like right at the beginning. It's going to arrive in a year or 2 years, and you need to be positioned to take advantage of it. So that would be, kind of my my first thing.
Mm-hmm.
The second piece, and transitioning into like how do you do it quickly. Just as an example, we sent out a lot of postcards. Because when I started, it was really kind of even pre-email, at least, and I was dealing with insurance companies, and they're not exactly generally on the cutting edge of technology. So, a lot of our marketing was snail mail. So we did a lot of postcards, which turned out to be a really effective way to just put in their hand. They get something. It had a really crisp, short message on it that reminded them of us. Now, the reason I bring that up is we found that to be really effective. When we did a mailing, we saw a bump. We saw a bump in orders. So we found critical points like that. You really got to pay attention to, what levers, when you're pulling the levers in your business, which ones have a really positive effect. Hone in on those and absolutely, figure out a way to maximize the effect of those things, because it's really easy to get caught up in all this peripheral, well, we're going to observe this and we're going to, if you're paying attention, you'll really quickly see what's working. And I would say abandon the other stuff. If you have things, don't try to just keep iterating a marketing campaign that's not resonating with people. What works, just refine it and beat it to death. I hate to say that. It sounds really boring, but you're far better off taking the maximum possible value out of something that works than trying to spend a bunch of money trying to convince people don't fall in love with your own ideas. Just figure out what works and use that.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. I think so many businesses take a shotgun approach to marketing, and it's really hard to tell what's working and what's not. And by paying attention to the things that are really causing something, you can kind of double down on those and really have an impact. I kind of feel like, and obviously I believe it based on what we're doing now, in the current landscape, social media, social marketing has to be a piece of what you're doing. And I clearly you are doing that. So what are some tips you can give people on social and marketing their company that way?
One of the first things I would say is just to have a consistent presence. And that consistent presence really needs to be not you necessarily talking about what you do, but maybe, finding other things that are amusing or entertaining to your audience.
Right.
I mean, this might sound like the most simplistic example, but I mean, think about a TV station. I mean, TV shows are not the point of a TV network.
Right.
The point of a TV network is to sell commercials.
Yeah.
So you put on what people love so that they'll be hanging around for those moments when you can go, hey, by the way, how about some Pepsi? And it really is. I mean, let's say on Twitter or whatever it is, or, you want people to notice you on LinkedIn or people to notice you on Google+. You've got to be putting something out there that is unusual enough that people are going to care about it. And and consistency really matters because, people, they'll stop by your campsite every now and then to maybe see what you're doing, but they won't, if they come by and the fire's out, a couple of times, they'll move on.
Right.
So you need to have something going on consistently. That's kind of a first step. I mean, that's kind of almost like your broadcast piece.
Right.
But the second, and I think the more critical piece, and the one that very often gets glossed over, is sort of paying attention to what people are saying to you. You and I talked about this before, and one of the things that really helped me with Tweet Jukebox is, people were telling me about how they were using my app, and my first reaction in listening to what they were saying on social media was, "You don't understand what I'm doing," and but then I quickly realized by listening and really like taking a step back is, no, Tim, you don't understand your market. They're trying to tell you something. You need to pay attention. And that really changed the way that we looked at what we're going to do kind of going forward with the software. And, that's the real value in social media. But it's paying attention. And when somebody doesn't understand or you feel like they don't understand something you're doing or saying, try to figure out, like drill into that a little bit. And that's an interesting point to me is people talk about, we're going to look at all the data points. Sometimes it's not data. Sometimes it's conversations.
Yeah.
And those little conversations with a few people, you'll start to pick up, kind of a recurrent thread. And when you find that, a lot of times that's where the gold is. I mean, it's lovely to have all this data and you can do a spreadsheet and that sounds really cool. But sometimes, it's being a good old fashioned merchant and talking to your customers.
Yeah. You made two great points there, Tim, that I actually talk about a lot. I tell people that I counsel on social media that everybody is a media company today. That's what we are. I'm a media company that also sells this. I'm a media company that also sells this. But to your point, you can't just broadcast. You have to engage and be human, and I think you're right on the money on that. That's great advice. And you mentioned Tweet Jukebox. You've created this service, which, as I mentioned to you before we started, I'm trying it out and it's really cool. Why? Why did you create Tweet Jukebox and what does it do?
Well, I mean, businesses kind of emerge for different reasons. And like sometimes people go, I think I could do this and I'd make a lot of money or something. Well, the origin of Tweet Jukebox was really straightforward. I was really frustrated because I was trying to interact with people on Twitter. I was trying to sell my book and get a little bit of awareness about who I was and what I was doing. But the amount of time I spent scheduling things in an effort to be consistent was huge. And from my perspective, that time is completely wasted. And simply because nobody on the receiving end, even if it's the most awesome, amusing, whatever tweet ever, nobody cares how it got there. They don't care if Tweet Jukebox sent it or if you carved it in stone and somehow got it into the internet. So the amount of time it took you to do it is irrelevant to the recipient. So that was like one piece, and then the second piece was also noticing that a lot of content is pretty evergreen. That I mean, there are some things that are topical, news related, trending topic kind of things, but a lot of stuff doesn't fall in that category. So repeating it is fine because the audience is moving around all the time. So anyhow, I got really frustrated. I was actually traveling, which I do a lot of, and I was in South Africa, and I told my wife, I said, this is insane because, you know, I'm spending all this time like scheduling stuff, and then we're getting ready to go on this road trip, and I'm like, well, I got to have enough stuff scheduled before like we get someplace that I can hook up to another broadband line. So anyhow, I called a buddy of mine, an IT guy named Len, and he was actually the first guy I worked for out of college, and we've worked together forever on different stuff. And he built it. So, I mean, that's the origin of the product. And I think, though, that it relates to any product that anyone's ever going to try to launch. I mean, you know, we're really trying to solve a problem. You know, and that's what the best products do, is solve a problem. And I think if you want to use social, like on Twitter, which is my most active channel, you know, it's time consuming. But I think the time where you're going to get your gold is in exactly what you just said. And that is, you know, engagement and listening. You know, the actual like sending out of your material is like gets people into your audience. But once they're there, then having the time to not be spent scheduling stuff or to be, you know, tweeting it manually. But once people are there, to be engaging with those people, you know, that's really where the best bang for the buck is, and that's why we developed the product. And ultimately, after having it for a while, people were saying, you know, maybe you ought to put that thing on the market. So in February, we put it out, and so far so good. We've got a few thousand users, so we're very happy about that.
That's cool, man. That's great, and continued success on that, Tim. Like I said, I'm using it, and it's pretty cool. So I encourage people to check it out, and that's at tweetjukebox.com. So right. I give everybody, you've done this before, so you know, I give everybody an opportunity to ask me one question. Do you have one queued up for me?
I guess, you know, the question I would ask you is, what is, you know, what would you say for you? I mean, I know you talked about how you view like the kind of the best uses of social, but what things do you find, maybe, and I'm asking you a little bit as a marketer, but what do you find most like frustrating still today when you're using social? I mean, what things do you find like difficult or daunting?
Oh yeah. You know, Tim, the most frustrating, I guess a couple things. For personally, I think one of the challenges is just, you know, it's just like everybody else. It's time. How do I get across each platform? I want to try new platforms. You know, I'm spending time in Snapchat. I'm spending time on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. So I think, you know, the biggest challenge is trying to be relevant across all those channels and playing in those channels appropriately, so that I'm not necessarily just saying, okay, I'm going to take Instagram, I'm going to take a picture and I'm going to blast it out to each place. I'm going to try and be intentional within each medium so they make the most sense within that. That's personally. And then honestly, the you know, from, you know, the consumer side is the people, and you kind of touched on it, where they're not engaging, they're not listening. It's interesting to me when people follow, or I follow somebody else, and there's just no effort to kind of really make a connection. Gary Vaynerchuk talked about how social media is sort of the gateway drug to one-on-one connection. So I think that people and brands are missing an opportunity to make that one-on-one connection. And so I'm trying to do that on my side to make sure I'm kind of practicing what I preach.
Yeah, no, well, I actually know just because we share a number of fellow followers, whatever, and sometimes we end up in conversations together, and I think, no, and it's awesome because there are people who are making comments, and I watch other people's, you know, feeds, and they've got huge followings, but people will say things to them, and it just like passing in the night. And I mean, I suppose it depends on what you want out of it, but I think, you know, what you're talking about doing, that's, it's hard because if you got a lot of channels going, it's a lot of stuff to pay attention to.
Totally.
But, you know, that's It's where the gold is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool, Tim. Thank you so much for being a part of the show once again. Always appreciate your time, and I know you're traveling now, so I appreciate you carving out some time for me. And we'll have to do it again sometime. Keep me posted on Tweet Jukebox.
Hey, Kirby, I will do. And any questions you or any of your followers have, please feel free to reach out to me at tim@tweetjukebox.com. Always happy to hear from folks.
All right. Thanks, Tim. And that's going to wrap up another edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We'll see you again next time. Hey, thanks for watching, but wait! Can you do me a favor? Please subscribe to my channel. If you haven't done it already, the way to do it's right over here. And hey, if you want to watch the last episode, check that out over here. Again, before you leave, subscribe!